Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Thank you guys for joining me here on Saturday evening to kind of talk about some last-minute Steelers news items here before the Black and Gold take on the Cincinnati Bengals tomorrow afternoon in Week 11 at home to try and improve their record to 6-4. Just a reminder that tomorrow, Ponzi and I will be going live on the channel starting at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Half-hour pregame show followed by live play-by-play and analysis of the game itself, followed by extensive post-game coverage. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already to join us for every single video that we put up on this channel throughout the season, as well as all of our live watch parties. But we did get some news today for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers did elevate two players from their practice squad to the game day roster. Those two players include Mark Robinson, linebacker, special teamer, and then Deshaun Jameson, the slot corner, will also be elevated to the active roster as well. Now, of course, that means that the Steelers declined to elevate Asante Samuel Jr. and Marquez Valdes-Scantling, two players that a lot of people thought the team would elevate before this football game, and certainly not having those two players means a couple of things for the Pittsburgh Steelers that we'll talk about here in a second. James Pierre is slated to get the start at outside corner for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's done a really good job these last 2 weeks, has 6 pass breakups. He also has the #1 coverage grade from Pro Football Focus out of every single corner in the league this season. So it certainly seems like James Pierre has earned an opportunity here to show what he can do as a starter going into this football game against the Cincinnati Bengals. And honestly, I kind of like the matchup for Pierre because he's kind of a bigger, longer-armed, physical, grimy type of corner. I think that he is somebody that, can certainly go up against a guy like T. Higgins, for example, and that's a pretty decent matchup for him. He can certainly play that physical brand of football that you need to play against a guy like T. Higgins. So even though Asante Samuel Jr. is getting ramped up, he's not going to be out there tomorrow. I think that this is probably the smart move for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Asante, first of all, hasn't played in 14 months. He's just learning the playbook. And to say, all right, less than a week after you're signed with us, we're going to put you out there and we're going to task you with going up against one of, if not the toughest wide receiver duos in the league to go up against in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, especially when you've got a guy in James Pierre that's playing as well as he's playing. I think it does make sense to allow Asante to kind of ramp up, and then I think we will see him for the first time next week when we play the Chicago Bears in Chicago. In terms of MVS, why he wasn't elevated, I think, it's just a matter of him not being ready for whatever reason, whether it's not picking up the playbook. And we have seen other receivers injected into this Steelers offense, with Arthur Smith in particular, having a hard time picking up the offense. Last year, Roman Wilson took the entire season to kind of pick up the offense. That was reported that he had a hard time picking up the scheme, especially because something you got to know about the Steelers offense is that they usually have at least 2 plays called in the huddle. So not only do you have to know what the first play is, but you also have to know what the second play is, and you have to have a really good grasp of the scheme and the playbook and what all the words mean, all that stuff. And if you don't, you're going to have a really hard time, knowing what to do out there. So maybe MVS is taking a little bit longer here to kind of know what to do. And then also, just didn't seem like he was getting a lot of time with the first team offense in practice. Aaron Rodgers alluded to that earlier this week. And then when reporters literally asked Arthur Smith on Thursday about MVS and whether or not he's going to be elevated, he pretty much just gave a general answer that all practice squad guys are trying to get elevated. So in terms of MVS, who knows how long it's going to take for him to get ramped up, and if he ever gets into that conversation where he's going to be a part of the game plan. But that certainly means that Arthur Smith, Aaron Rodgers, and the Steelers offense is expecting Calvin Austin III, Roman Wilson, and others to step up this week as secondary receiving options. So another update that we got today was that Cory Trice Jr. will be out for this game yet again. Now, we haven't seen Cory this entire season. He spent the better part of the first quarter of the season on IR. Then over the last 19 days, he's been designated to return with a 21-day practice window to get off of IR. But he is now listed as out for this football game. So now he only has until Tuesday to get off of IR and be added to the active roster, or his season will be over. So we'll see what ends up happening next week, whether or not Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin put Cory Trice on the active roster and whether he'll be good enough to go next week. But, it's certainly pointing in the direction of Cory Trice Jr.'s season here in 2025 being over. And if that's the case, I don't know if he ever plays a down for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the future. So that's unfortunate, but we'll see what happens by Tuesday, because that's the cutoff day to make a decision if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I do want to go over some storylines here. I want to go over some things that I'm going to be keeping my eye out for tomorrow afternoon when the Steelers take on the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, it's a really important football game. If you're getting swept by Joe Flacco and the Bengals, when they don't have Joe Burrow and they don't have Trey Hendrickson for either game, that's not going to provide this fan base a whole lot of hope that they can, go into the final stretch of this season and, become AFC North champions after a 4-1 start. And that would be devastating. So hopefully this team can bounce back, have a good game tomorrow at home against a team that they should pretty clearly beat. If they can get that win and get back on the right track, that could mean a lot of good things for this football team moving forward. So the first thing and the first storyline that I'm going to be watching out for tomorrow is whether or not Aaron Rodgers will be back to playing good football, or whether or not, whether he's going to put another stinker out onto the field. Because last week, obviously, wasn't a great performance for QB1. He had a number of overthrows, missed multiple throws that he probably should have hit. And if he hits those throws, it's probably a lot different of a ball game versus the Los Angeles Chargers. I said last week after the game that I thought Aaron Rodgers was the reason why the Pittsburgh Steelers lost that football game. And I completely stand by that now. So hopefully he can have a performance closer to what he put on the field versus Cincinnati the first time around. I mean, a bunch of yards, multiple touchdowns. He was really slinging the rock all over the place. And if he can have that kind of performance tomorrow, and my prediction is he will, that's certainly going to be a step in the right direction for not only him, but the passing offense and the offense as a whole. So hopefully Rodgers is going to be able to bounce back, and I think he will. Another thing I'm going to be watching out for is, will Arthur Smith and Mike Tomlin decide to change up Jaylen Warren's usage in the run game? And specifically, do they use him more on third downs? Because usually the way that it's been set up this season is that Jaylen Warren is playing mostly on early downs, first and second down, and then Kenny Gainwell is the guy that they trust to come on third down situations and be kind of a change of pace back. And for the most part, it's that plan has worked this year. But last week, obviously, very unsuccessful on third downs, and Kenny Gainwell certainly is not as good as Jaylen Warren. And, in those big time money down situations, can make an argument that we should have our best offensive player out there in those types of situations more. So if that's going to happen, obviously, Jaylen Warren can't be out there for every single play, or else he's going to get tired and he's going to wear down as the game goes on and as the season goes on. So if he's going to play more on third down, that means somebody else is going to have to take some more early down reps. And honestly, I don't love Kenny Gainwell in those types of situations, even though he did pretty darn good job in early down situations against the Minnesota Vikings in week 4 when Jaylen Warren was out with an injury. I think actually Caleb Johnson is more suited to be, an early down back. So if you want to play Jaylen Warren more on third down, I would say give Caleb Johnson some more snaps on those first and second down situations. We've seen KJ have some pretty good stuff over the last 2 weeks. He's had, limited reps, but in his limited time out on the field versus the Colts and versus the Chargers, he actually played pretty darn well and was consistently getting pretty darn good yardage. So I wonder if Arthur Smith is going to switch that up a little bit so that they can get Jaylen Warren out there on those possession type of downs and help this third down offense be better moving forward. Another thing that I'm going to be watching out for is, can another pass catcher step up this week, whether that's a receiver, whether that's a tight end, whether that's a running back. It can't all be on DK Metcalf. And we've seen, this year, I think like 70% of third downs for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year, they have had a double team on DK Metcalf. Teams are just trying to take away DK, and they're forcing somebody else to beat them in these third down types of situations. And Aaron Rodgers needs to be able to look in other people's directions and try and make something work with somebody else, whether that's Calvin Austin III, whether that's Roman Wilson, whether that's Pat Freiermuth, who has killed the Bengals throughout his career. Somebody else is going to have to step up this week, and I think if anybody's going to do it, I think it's going to be the same guy that did it the first time we played the Bengals, and that's Pat Freiermuth. Muth had over 110 yards receiving, multiple touchdowns, really had by far his best performance of the season against the Bengals the first time around, and I'm hoping that this is finally the week that Arthur Smith starts featuring Pat Freiermuth more as opposed to Jonnu Smith, because Jonnu Smith, been talking about this pretty consistently throughout the week. It just hasn't been it, man. He doesn't run good routes. He doesn't have particularly good hands. I don't think he's necessarily as good of a run after the catch guy as he was last year in Miami. And he doesn't block, so there's just not a whole lot of value that he brings to the table when he's actually out there on the field. Whereas I think Pat Freiermuth is the better blocker, so he is more valuable in that category. But he also runs better routes. I think he's got better zone IQ, so he knows where to find those soft spots in zone. I think he's got better hands, all those different things. I think he's a more complete receiving tight end as opposed to Jonnu Smith, who doesn't really provide a whole lot. The only thing I'd say he's slightly better than Muth at is running after the catch, but even then, it's not providing that much value. So I'm hoping Pat Freiermuth is the guy that they feature this week. Aaron Rodgers did allude to the idea of getting Muth more looks, so hopefully that's a little bit of a tease that they are going to feature Freiermuth in the offensive game plan a bit more this week, especially after his stellar performance against this defense back in Week 7. So really looking forward to seeing what Pat Freiermuth can do. I have a feeling that he's going to have a big game tomorrow afternoon. Then shifting over to the defensive side of the ball, some of the things that I'm going to be looking out for. Number one, has Terrell Austin learned his lesson? Because obviously back in Week 7, even though the offense played really well, put up over 30 points in that ball game, they still lost the game because the defense couldn't get a stop against Joe Flacco and Jamar Chase and those guys. And I'm hoping that Terrell Austin has kind of learned that if you try to blitz, Cincinnati, and you try to go one-on-one coverage with really talented receivers like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, especially with the frankly lack of true shutdown man-to-man talent on the Steelers roster, you're going to lose that battle, man. And if you just try to go soft zone, they're going to hit you underneath. And then if you try to go man-to-man with no safety help, with no double teams, they're going to, Jamar Chase in particular, is going to beat his man one-on-one. So I'm hoping Terrell Austin can take a page out of his own playbook. His first ever game calling plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers back in 2022 was the season opener in Cincinnati against Joe Burrow and the Bengals that had just gone to the Super Bowl. And what he did with not the best secondary, I might add, he did some very creative post-snap rotations. He played a lot of Tampa 2. When they did play cover 3, they used post-snap rotations to get into it. They didn't blitz a whole lot, and when they did, it was very well-timed blitzes that ended up delivering results. I'm hoping he takes a page out of that playbook, and he plays a lot of split safety stuff with Jalen Ramsey, Kyle Duggar at the safety, get them involved in run defense, which really opens up this defense to be ambiguous and to not be static and to not be predictable, which I think was a problem the last time we played the Cincinnati Bengals. You want Joe Flacco to hold the ball as long as possible, and if you can do that, then hopefully that's going to give opportunities to T.J. Watt and Nick Herbig, who will be starting in this ballgame, and Cam Hayward to get home, because this is one of the most talented pass rushes in the National Football League, whether with or even without Alex Highsmith. And Highsmith will be out for this game, by the way. So I'm excited to see what Nick Herbig is going to be able to do. But something else I'll be interested to see is how much, if any, do they put Jalen Ramsey in the slot? Because they did bring him in to be their slot defender this season, and he actually, when he's played slot, has played very well. His biggest issue is when he's been asked to play outside and in man-to-man coverage versus really, really good receivers like Jamar Chase, for example. He got absolutely toasted against Jamar back in Week 7. So I can almost guarantee you that that's not going to be the plan this week. But with Jabril Peppers, who is now back healthy, do you think about putting him at safety next to Kyle Duggar, having those two play the safety spots, and then Brandon Echols, who has kind of struggled in the slot these last 2 weeks? Do you replace him with Jalen Ramsey, who's more physical, who's more versatile, who's better in coverage as a slot defender, and take this secondary to an even higher level to what we've seen these last 2 weeks, where this secondary's had their 2 best weeks of the season. So I guess we'll have to see what the game plan looks like in that regard. But another thing I'll be watching very closely, and a player I'll be watching very closely, is James Pierre, because he's getting his first true start on the outside this season. And he's played super well when Darius Slay has left with injuries these last 2 weeks. He's got 6 pass breakups. Right now, the leader in the National Football League in PBUs has 8, and that's for the entire season. James Pierre has already got 6 in about a game and a half of game reps. So he has been super productive. Teams have tried to take advantage of him when he's had to come in, and he has said, no, sir, and he has shut down everybody that he has gone up against. He currently has the #1 PFF coverage grade in the league for a reason. So now that he's going to be asked to be a starter this week, going up against a legitimate, receiver that is just incredible in T. Higgins, one of the best, if not the best, #2 receiver in the game, how does he go up against a guy like that? And I'll be very, very interested to see how it plays out this week, because Pierre's been a revelation these last 2 weeks, and if he can keep that up, it's going to be tough to honestly take him out of the starting lineup, because he's just been playing super well. But then the final storyline I'm going to be watching is, does Keyshawn Williams continue to return punts for this team, because he lost a punt last week against the Chargers, and we saw after one special teams mistake from a rookie, Caleb Johnson, back in week 2, they said no more for you. He hasn't seen kickoff returns since. So do they say the same thing to Keyshawn? Because now you do have Calvin Austin III, who is one of the premier punt returners in the league. Do you put him back out there after Keyshawn Williams fumbled that football last week? I'll be looking to see what the answer to that question is as well. But that's going to be it for today's show, guys. I appreciate you stopping by here for this last-minute update on the Pittsburgh Steelers before their Week 11 matchup versus the Bengals tomorrow afternoon. Again, guys, we'll be going live tomorrow starting at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 30-minute pregame show, followed by live play-by-play and analysis, and then extensive post-game coverage after the game tomorrow afternoon. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers.